Okay, and we're good. Excellent. Well, thank you folks for joining me for this session. This is around the global goals and global citizenship, sustainable development goals, and also a concept that I've created and as part of the outreach work that I do called Teaspoons of Change. So I'll get into all of that at some stage, but to kick off, I will start with a shared screen. I'll get into the presentation, but then throughout the presentation, there's plenty of time for people to make comments. So hopefully you're familiar with the chat function. We'll use that quite a lot. Other times I'll open it for the speakers to mute to come off and people can make some comments. And then please at any stage ask your questions. And I'll either get to those at the end of a breath or I'll pause throughout the session as well to take some Q&A, which would be fantastic. But we've got someone from the Ukraine, someone from Brisbane, Pakistan, myself, I'm here in Aldinga, which is just south of Adelaide in South Australia, and I'm in my Happy Simply tiny house. So this is a fully self-sufficient house on wheels off the grid. So I've got solar, rainwater capture, and compost toilet and all those sorts of things. So trying to be a good global citizen, which I'll get into later. Usually I'm flying around and putting lots of pollution in the air, but because of the situation, I'm actually being quite responsible as a good, sustainable global citizen. So I'll kick it off. Let me share my screen. Excellent. So my name is Darcy Lunn with a very strange spelling. That's my mother's fault, but it's an Irish name with a French spelling, and it's very hard for some immigration when they're trying to figure that or filling out their forms. And so this session is called Teaspoons of Change and the Global Goals. Now, I prefer to call the Sustainable Development Goals the global goals because often they're referred to as the SDGs, which any acronym can be confusing to some people, and it is a little bit close to STDs. So I tend to go for the global goals instead. I prefer that. It sounds a bit more friendly and a bit more approachable to most people. But otherwise, I'll be talking a lot about SDGs, which is exactly the same thing. Okay, there's a thing here about recording it. I've done that. Use some hashtags there if you want and tweet away, etc. Cool. So this is session one. I've just put together a series of 6 sessions that runs from, well, what is global citizenship and what does it mean to be a global citizen, through to how do we work out a plan to be a champion of change? How do we enact not just change within ourselves, our teaspoons of change, but how do we actually enact change that will influence our community? So this is just the first session of a line of different sessions there that I've just been working out and putting up on my website, which is good. So are you a global citizen is the title for this session specifically. Now, if I have ever asked anyone this question and not given the answers, they do tend to go a bit crazy. So I will make sure that you get your answers here as well. So in English, there are only 10 countries with 4 letters, not including Ireland in Gaelic, which is Irie or something, I think. But here they are. So we've got Iran, Iraq, Oman, Peru, Fiji, Laos, Cuba, Chad, Mali, and the last one is also in Africa, one of the smallest countries to have ever been represented in the World Cup of Soccer, and that is Togo. So there are the 10 countries with 4 letters. I had people who came into the chat room earlier and we sort of got this around, and I think he ended up with 5 or 6 there. Suzanne, that was a remarkable effort. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I am speaking to you from. This is the Kaurna people's land, or they're the custodians of this land, and I want to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and just over 50,000 years that Aboriginal people have been on the lands of Australia, have looked after it and kept it in pretty good condition, and I hope that we can honour that and be good custodians of our lands for future generations as well. Cool. Okay, so let's start with a bit of a global goals quiz, and this is just a general kind of quiz. I've just got to make sure I can get the chat up on here. Yep, here we go. So I'm going to ask you to put your answers in the chat section here in a second. And this is just to get a bit of a bit of an idea of where you're at around these global goals. Do they mean anything to you? Have you seen them before? And then looking at that, we can make a pretty quick advancement on, well, how do we actually integrate these global goals into our daily life and into the lives of our schools or students or people around us? So with number one, how many global goals are there? If you want to quickly type in your guess onto the chat, that would be terrific. My chat has disappeared somehow. Let's see if I can get, there we go. So there seems to be an overwhelming majority of 17 here. Okay, excellent. Yes, of course there is. Do you know the number of targets? As a bonus point, not that the points get you anything. Do you know how many targets there are around the global goals? There are 17 goals and there are such and such targets and such indicators. Does anyone want to have a crack at how many targets there are? Then I know you're as boring as I am, knowing irrelevant facts around these global goals. But like you put in the answers, yes, there are 17 global goals. There are 169 targets and 244 indicators. So I don't actually get into the details of the global goals very often. I find that people get caught up in the weeds very quickly. So the way that I look at the global goals is they're a collective context. Basically, that's the way that I refer to them. So number two here. So what is global goal number 5? If you know that one off the top of your head. No multiple choice for this one. Throw your answers in to the chat space there if you know what global goal number 5 is off the top of your head. For some reason my chat isn't coming through very well. I can't get my chat working for some unknown reason, but that's okay. I think some people put in their answers. Lovely. And then this question here. So sorry, I should go back. Question number 2. Global goal number 5 is gender equality. So the reason I'm sort of asking this is you don't have to know the global goals off by heart to be a good advocate for them. If you do, that then becomes a bonus. Because what I've found is that global citizenship, and particularly these global goals, is around adding them to existing contexts and situations. So for example, an example that I give is riding your bicycle. So riding a bicycle, oh yes, we know this is a good thing and it probably fits into the global goal somewhere. But if you know those global goals quite well, then it helps you to speak to them, to grab existing opportunities and contextualize them within those global goals. So I'm not saying memorize them, but I'm saying the more familiar you become with these global goals, the more you can advocate and contextualize them into things that are already happening. So the bicycle example is, if you're riding a bike, you're going to be hitting global goal number 3, good health and well-being for your own health and benefit. You're going to be hitting global goal number 11, sustainable cities and communities, because you're actively a part of saying the kind of society that you want to live in. If we all rode bicycles, then our governments or our city council or whoever would create more cycling infrastructure. So riding a bike connects to global goal number 11. And of course, riding a bike connects to global goal number 13, climate action. So yeah, so I'll just say it again, is that you don't have to memorize these global goals, but if you are, and if you do become more familiar with them, it will actually help with you being able to contextualize stuff that's happening and speak around them. And you're not telling people what they should do, or you should do this, or you should do that. You're adding this context into everyday actions that are already happening. So I think that's kind of a cool thing. And we've got some people joining us as well here. from Dallas. Excellent. Thanks, Reba. Thanks for joining us. And my chat's working again, so I'm happy about that. Okay, so hopefully, yeah, that makes sense. So question number 3 here is, do you think anyone can be a global citizen? What do you reckon? Do you think anyone in the world can be a global citizen? Our friend from Pakistan, our friend from Dallas, my elderly mother who lives 9 kilometers from here, myself as a global citizen educator, or anyone else. Do you think anyone can be a global citizen? Yes, no, or maybe? What do you think? Yeah, we've got some yeses. Okay. Yeah. And then of course it then comes back to your own definition of how do you define what is a global citizen, and is that available to everyone or to anyone? So I'll move on to the next question. And the next question is, do you feel your small actions have an impact on the world? So what we're going to do for this is we're going to use a thing called 5-finger throw. So on a scale of 0 or 1 to 5, I want you to indicate, do you feel your small actions have an impact on the world? So 0 or 1 would be no matter what I do, some government or corporation, whatever, is going to make my personal choice so insignificant that it has nothing to do with it. Or 5, yes, I think that my personal actions do make a huge difference, and that will create change in the world. So yeah, if you want to throw your 5 fingers up, either on the video or on the chat, whatever's up to you. I can see Julie, thank you. She's a 5. Who else we got? Couple of 5s as well. Okay, small actions make a difference. In a collective context, we got 5s all around. Okay. Cool. Well, I mean, for me personally, I would probably sit a little bit more around a 3 or a 4, probably more so a 4. Obviously, the only thing that matters are my own actions, and that's the only thing I have control over. Whether or not they make a significant impact is really hard to measure. So let me move on here. So what I do is make sure that I have a combination of optimism and realism, which I'll get to after that. Actually, it feeds into this question. Do you think we'll achieve the global goals by 2030? And by achieving the global goals, that means that we will have ended extreme poverty, of which there's the World Bank definition for living on $1.90 or less per day, reduce inequality, and protect our planet. So again, I'll ask for a 5-finger throw. Do you think we'll achieve the global goals by 2030? What do you think? On a scale of 0 to 5. Thanks, Julie. We've got a 3 there. Okay, I got a 2. Yeah, 2s. COVID, maybe because of COVID, we might actually achieve them. Because of COVID, we might not. Who knows what influence COVID will have? It's an interesting situation. Cool. Well, the thing for me is, I mean, we don't know. We don't know if we'll achieve these or not. The only thing that I can guarantee that is, if we do nothing, nothing can change. That is the only guarantee we have. If we do something, then hopefully, maybe, who knows, something can change. So that's I suppose that's the best odds I can give to students and teachers when I go to schools, is that I cannot guarantee that your actions will actually change the whole world and will achieve these global goals. But I can guarantee you that if you do nothing and we go about as business as usual, then absolutely we cannot achieve these global goals. So we might as well try something, because then the odds are greater to try something than doing nothing. That's kind of the odds that I lay down and give to them. And I'd also talk about this balance between optimism and realism. And we need both. Okay, if we're too optimistic, then we can become deflated when we don't see that change or that progression happen. If we're too optimistic, then it's harder to bring people on board with us sometimes. And then on the other side, we need some realism. So to help that balance of optimism, realism. But if we have too much realism of like, COVID's here, we've got some interesting world leaders at the moment who don't seem to be overly geared towards collective contexts. We've got blah, 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 all these sorts of things. If that becomes too heavy without enough optimism, then it's too hard to think we can't do anything, and so why bother trying? So in students and teachers, when I go and present these ideas, is I always talk about that balance of optimism and realism, and we need both at different times. At the moment, we probably need a good dose of optimism with what's happening in the world. So it's just a matter of where you are at your stage. And the thing with creating change and global citizenship is that it really goes in plateaus and peaks. And sometimes we feel like, this is amazing. You know, I just did this advocacy work and we're getting a new cycle lane put in, which is true from next door. But it took me 6 years to try and get that bike lane to come to this community. So there was a whole bunch of optimism and realism throughout that. And so creating change and wanting to see positive change in the world is a delicate tightrope of these two situations. Cool. Well, let me get into these global goals. So yes, there are 17 goals, 169 targets, 244 indicators. But again, really for me, I try and present a welcome mat to these global goals, because to most people, they're too big, too overwhelming, don't know where to start. They look nice. They've got lovely colors, nice little icons, really, really well done on the iconography. But what the hell does that have to do with me? You know, how can I have any positive impact involved in this in any sort of way as one individual somewhere here in the world, or as a student, or whatever? And so this is where I try and find and create interesting ways or platforms for people to have a closer connection to those goals. Now, these global goals are from 2015 to 2030. We're already 5 years down the track. And so I love this little banner from Project Everyone, who do a lot of really good stuff around making the global goals more accessible. And they've put together this idea of a decade of action. So we're lagging already in the first 5 years, but let's see if we can step it up. And in this decade, let's see if we can achieve these global goals. And there's another wonderful example here from PPAP, who's Pico Pico. You have to see his video. This is the link, but I can share this later. Is that this guy has done a video. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but he does pineapple pen, PPAP. And so he did this with the global goals. So I had the good life goals stuck in my head. And the thing is that this guy, a middle-aged Japanese man wearing a leopard suit and a mustache, I don't even know if you'd call that a mustache. He's talking about these global goals. Now, I love that because it doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming thing. It can be lighthearted and interesting and going, well, if this guy can do it, then so can I. But the other thing I like about Pico Pico is that he's doing what he enjoys doing, which is wearing leopard suits and singing and dancing. And that's my big message for teachers and students is be who you are and then bring these global goals into your life. So you don't have to go and work for UNICEF or Gates Foundation or WHO, or like I've been fortunate to work with all of them. You don't have to go and do that. You can be you. You can be a hairdresser and a gardener and a lawyer and a whatever it is that you want to do, but you can also bring these global goals into your life. And if this dude can do it, then so can you. So I really encourage people to look up Pico Pico SDG video. Check it out, watch it, and share it with people. But I love it because it disarms people to think, oh, these global goals, I can't do that. And then they see this guy put together his interaction with the global goals and go, oh, well, okay, if this buffoon, wonderful buffoon he is, can do it, then so can I. So I try and use very clever, blind spot kind of videos and activities to get the global goals into people's lives without, you know, hammering it down their throat and having people to just have fun and interactive ways to engage. So back to these goals. Look, 17 goals, etc. But there are also a set of good life goals. So I'm not sure if you've heard of these before. They came out from a think tank called One Planet, which has a focus on global goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. And so they produce these good life goals. So these good life goals are an adaptation of the global goals. They're just a little bit more personable, a bit easier to understand and much easier to connect with. And behind each of these good life goals are 5 action points. So it kind of looks like it should be for kids, but really what I've found is that these are great for teachers in particular, because then teachers feel like, oh yeah, I can understand this. Those global goals seem a bit scary. So I love introducing these as a wonderful stepping stone to then integrating them into the global goals. So what I tend to encourage in schools is to have a set of these good life goals up on the wall and a set of global goals up on the wall. And so when they're teaching and doing their thing, they can make reference to these good life goals and global goals. If they're in a maths class or physics, music, drum, whatever it is, they can start to bring in these good life goals and those global goals into the classroom. Now that's a lot for teachers to digest. So I tend to try and space it out as I'm going along. Get familiar with these good life goals, know that they're connected with the global goals, and with an intention that we are going to bring those global goals more and more into our classes to increase global literacy and competency as we go along. But if we work together as a global community with these good life goals, with these global goals, what we're trying to do is end extreme poverty, reduce inequality, and protect our planet. Now that's why those global goals exist. Often I'm at a school and I'm speaking in a wonderful theatre or gymnasium or something, and I say to the students, look, think about how was this building built? Well, first of all, you needed a plan, okay? And those global goals are a great plan for us to work together to achieve big things. Once you've got a plan, you need all the bits and pieces, you need the materials, you need the resources, you need lots of people who can do lots of different jobs, and brick by brick, piece by piece, you build that building. Okay, it's the same with these global goals. They're a plan for us to try and work together in all sorts of different ways and shapes, put something together so that we can achieve these things. Because neither you nor I can achieve any of these things by ourselves. And the global goals, they have flaws, and it's a bit interesting, some of them, but they exist. They're a blueprint for us to try and work together as a global community to achieve big things. So that's how I try and really get people on board with this concept of the global goals and global citizenship. And so to make that more personal and practical, that's why I created this concept of teaspoons of change. Personal choices, decisions, and actions that have a positive impact on people on the planet. So if you say to someone, right, we need to end gender equality, we need to have gender equality, not end it, or we need to reduce inequality. It's like, well, okay, what the hell can I do? I'm just one person here in my little tiny house. What on earth does that have to do with me? And so then we can start to think about it from a personal perspective. And so I use teaspoons of change and the global goals kind of hand in hand. So if we're looking at something like gender equality, then what does that look like to me as an individual, as a white male? What can I do that will help support gender equality and understanding differences and Or where do my actions fit into a bigger context? So when I do those small things, it then contributes to those global goals. So those things go hand in hand for me to make sure that we have a personal and practical connection, and that we know that it fits into a collective context. And that's sort of the lens that I just share with schools. So that any one moment in their classroom, in the whatever it is, if they're looking at physics and motion, then they might look at, well, here's this topic. Where would that be represented in something we do in daily life? Okay, then find that. What does that look like in a collective context with 7.2 billion people on a finite planet? Then that'll fit into the global goals. if we're looking at this concept, what does this mean to you? Okay, and if you're looking at physics and motion, then you might be looking at seatbelts. Okay, whereas as a person, I can make sure that I wear a seatbelt and ensure that other people in the car when I travel are wearing seatbelts. So that's, you know, related to motion and all those laws of Newton's laws, etc., etc. So you're adding a personal context to content, and you're adding a collective context to content, both at the same time. So it's like this lens that we can bring into our classrooms and interchange pretty much at any time. So I'll just go back from there. I just want to pause and see, does anyone have any questions thus far? I've been speaking sort of at you for a long time. So are there any questions thus far? That was a fair bit to digest just there. And if you have a question, then you can either raise your hand, which is pretty easy to do, or unmute yourself, or write it in the chat section. Or if you've been playing online bingo, that's fine as well. And you're like, oh, he stopped talking. So any questions there? Otherwise, that's fine. I'll keep rolling along. Cool. No questions thus far from our friend in Pakistan, which is a wonderful place. I was lucky to work with UNICEF in Islamabad and Lahore, Karachi, but I couldn't make it to Peshawar, unfortunately. One day. Cool. Well, I'll keep rolling along. So from teaspoon to change, that's why I think we kind of need that personal and practical perspective, and we need the collective context. And then I just try and find lots and lots of examples of things to help support people to make closer connections to those global goals. So these are the SDG Pandas, which is a little app you can download, and it fits into your WhatsApp sticker collection. So I like adding these things to everyday contexts. And I think that's the trick. So for me, when I'm looking at global citizenship education or sustainability service, these kinds of things, I tend not to look head on at it. I tend to try and come in underneath the carpet and add context to things that are already happening, particularly initially at schools where workplaces where it might not be so common. And then from there, then yes, we have Earth Day, like it was yesterday. Happy Earth Day to everyone, 50th anniversary, where we might do something specific on sustainability and global goal number 13. But then otherwise, I'm trying to find opportunities to just sneak it in under the carpet for people to see, oh, this thing fits into a bigger context in the world. Okay, that's pretty cool. So yeah, when I do ride my bike, I'm making a personal change, but it has a global impact. And so that's basically the idea, is to try and make personal connections to a collective context and their impact. And so this is where, you know, the saying goes as acting personally and locally, but impacting globally. And that's really hard to do. It's so hard to do. And a great example is, you know, a plastic straw. And pre-COVID times, when you could go and get a drink and it would come with a plastic straw. And you think, well, it's okay. It's only one plastic straw. I'm just one person. It doesn't really matter. But the world uses almost 1 billion plastic straws every day, because one person has used a plastic straw. And so unfortunately, that's where our actions do matter into a context. And so before, you know, do our actions matter? We had fives all round. Yeah, that is exactly true. And if we do decide to take those actions, they have a significant collective impact. Often that isn't enough. Often we then have to try and legislate things. We have to try and create a social norm around these kinds of things. And that's quite difficult. So our personal actions have to then be met by laws and governance and a few other things as well. But again, it has to start from ourselves as individuals. So yeah, and then there's lots of good news stories out there. I think global citizenship can become quite scary and very big very quickly. So I love sharing good news stories and good ideas. This came from the Happy broadcast. There were about 50 of these. This is just a capture of a few of them. You know, my favorite one is they found some seaweed that helps cut down farts from cows and burps. That's impressive. That's good news for anyone, I would have thought. So I like to find all of these good examples of things that we are doing, and not just like, here's the challenge and here's the issues of the world. Well, here are some of the solutions, and how do we create more of those solutions, and how do we participate? How do we support good people doing good things? That kind of idea. So what would be an example from your school or your home or your life? So a positive action or change you have noticed and how it has an impact globally. There's a spelling mistake there. So normally I'd put this into breakout groups, but we don't have that function because I probably forgot to ask for it. Yeah, we can't split up into chat groups. So I'd just love to hear from anyone. If you have a comment around this, what's an example of something and how does that fit into a global context? Anyone want to be brave and put forward an idea? You can unmute yourself with or without video, but it would be wonderful to hear from anyone.
Hello. Right. So this is Beniza. And we stopped selling mineral water bottles in the canteen. So students had to get their own bottles from home, reusable bottles from home, and they could purchase the water from the canteen, which was in a dispenser, and they could fill in their own water bottles. That drastically reduced the number of plastic bottles that were being used.
Wonderful. So that's a great example. Now the thing for me is then creating the bigger picture around that action. So when we use less plastic, that fits into Good Life goal, you know, number 14, for example, life below water. Number 13, climate action. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. So what I love doing is when we're doing these actions is to then paint the picture of what that fits into a global context. And then you can measure it, like you were saying. You know, you can look at, where does plastic come from? It comes from oil or petroleum. So you can actually count, you know, how much plastic you would have saved and how much oil or petroleum would have gone into those bottles. So for me, what I find is with these great examples, what we can do is enhance them by adding that bigger context of where they fit, which you probably already did because you're on this video chat, not by accident. But what I find is that it's a very important narrative, because when we show that our little actions collectively have a big impact, we can then talk about the other things. You know, we might have less meat throughout the week in our canteens, or we might have a policy for treating new students and having wonderful inductions for them and having mentors, or these sorts of things. So all of these good examples, I think if we paint the picture of how they fit in globally, then it really starts to have quite a big impact of creating a narrative of how to be a more active and effective global citizen. Thank you. Anyone else want to share an example? And during COVID, we're lucky that there's quite a few things that have come out from living a life of isolation. There's certainly more people walking and riding outside. Cool. I shall keep maneuvering along. So here's a couple of questions for you. Well, what is a global citizen? And we get asked that question from time to time. We hear global citizen this, or if any of you are familiar with the International Baccalaureate, you know, it's global citizen diploma and all sorts of different things are held around. But, you know, well, what is it? And that's, I'm just going to skip over this one. So you might be thinking about, well, what is a global citizen? But actually, there is a much better question, a bigger provocation, is can anyone be a global citizen? And we thought, yes, they can. Yep, we've already done that. And then, can everyone be a global citizen? Can everyone on the planet be a global citizen? It's a good question to ask. Might do a thumb check. Yes, they can. No, maybe. Not sure. But then the ultimate question, my favorite question for almost about 10 years now of doing lots of global citizenship engagement is, are you a global citizen? And unfortunately, our chat function, so the breakout rooms hasn't been enabled, so we can't do this. But are you a global citizen? Now, that question is far more significant than what is a global citizen. Because if you ask, are you a global citizen, then it has to be personal. You have to have your own definition. You have to understand, well, what does it mean to you? So again, I'll open up the lines. Does anyone want to be brave and answer this question? Provocation more than question. Anyone there? Anything in the chats? Like to think I am. Got some confident yeses there. Accept global values. Oh, I've been missing the chat. Sorry, it goes off when I change slides. Reusable cups and metal straws. I'm just looking back through the chat. Yeah. So, but then the thing is, oh yes, I am a global citizen. Cool. But then there's always a spectrum of what does it mean to be a more active and effective global citizen. And that's what, like, that's wonderful space. I love that space because from the time I wake up in the morning to the time I go to bed at night, I can think about how many choices do I have where I can become a more active and effective global citizen. And for me, it's not just about a title or if I've been to many countries. It's what is my impact in the world, and how do I try and improve that as much as possible without trying to be perfect, because no one is, and then just trying to do what I can with my little slice of life. A UNO ambassador, students, local actions. Yeah, lovely, cool. So the thing is, global citizenship isn't a definition. For me, it's a personal interaction and a spectrum of what that means to you. So with your peers or your students or your workplace or whatever it is, this is a great question to have. Are you a global citizen? And without saying that, well, to be a global citizen, you have to work for UNICEF. That doesn't work. It's about trying to make good choices, good decisions, and good actions as much as possible. Or, as you've put in the chat there, it's a way of life. And I believe that global citizenship, sustainability, service, these sorts of things isn't just something we do. It needs to be a part of who we are. And for us to be a part of that, then we have to have our own personal connection to our actions and their impacts. So I often say to students, you know, when you see a bit of litter on the ground, the biggest issue isn't the litter, that is an issue, but the biggest issue is that someone hasn't made a connection between their actions and their impact. And so I can't go around and tell people and slap them for littering and not connecting their actions to impacts. But what we have to do is be very clever and try and find out ways where we can try and connect people to their own actions and their impacts by showing positive stories, by offering provocations like, are you a global citizen? By finding examples of other people or sports stars or these sorts of things. So yeah, so it's tricky and it's fun and interesting. But it's also about just trying to make that connection. Yeah, global projects. And even if you're not involved in global projects, and the fact that you are, that is fantastic. Even if you are just helping out with your local sports team or minding your neighbor's kids or whatever it is, that is still an act of global citizenship in my books, in my definition. because you're doing something that has a positive impact in your community. And if every community did that, then we would live on a fantastic planet. So I don't get caught up in the detail of global citizenship, of it having to be global, but actually knowing that being a global citizen is about good choices, good decisions, and good actions, at least for me. But then it's up to everyone to make their own definition. Cool. So hopefully you can take that question with you. That will be useful to throw it out as a provocation for other people. And then this is the slide that I use to kind of summarize everything. Basically, if we do these small, oops, let me go back. If we do these little small teaspoons of change, small actions that have a positive impact, you can call it whatever you want. I just call it teaspoons of change. If you do those small things that have a positive impact, that helps us become a more active and effective global citizen, which contributes to those global goals. Kalas, that's basically it. That's the basic concept for me around global citizenship. And then this also works in reverse. So if we want to achieve these big global goals, we need to think as global citizens, knowing that we're just one person of more than 7 billion in the planet. And then we need to act in our daily teaspoons of change as much as possible. Now, the thing for me with teaspoons of change isn't to go around giving anyone a guilt trip or a moral bashing or telling them what to do. It's by trying to find opportunities so people can make more good decisions, good choices, and good actions. Like you said, getting rid of the mineral bottle water, the water bottles, reusable cups and metal straws at the other school that I read. All those little things. So do those little things, but give them the context of what it means to the world as well. And then that small action actually feels a little bit more significant. So in other sessions that I would give, or with a live audience standing in front of hundreds of students or teachers or whoever, I would be thinking about, well, what questions do you have to becoming a more active and effective global citizen? What do you need to know so that you can become a better global citizen? And I think if we build our questions around that, then we can kind of leapfrog in our skills of being an effective global citizen, because we're not just trying to answer this is what it should be. We're thinking about it for ourselves. Hey, I'd love to know how to engage with government more, or I've got this business that really doesn't care about the environment. You know, what can I do? Who can I connect with, or what organizations or what examples are there where people have taken on big business to try and, you know, change their ways or whatever it is. So again, does anyone have any questions around that? Do you have any questions about being an active or an effective global citizen? Without me pretending to know what the answer will be, but possibly offering some ideas. Give you a moment there if anyone's got a quick question. And this is a bit more of a takeaway or take home kind of question, this one. It's usually something that will come to you a bit later on and like, oh, okay, yeah, I wonder if doing this actually makes a difference, or all those sorts of things. Cool. And so for me, I love this. This is from one of my favorite blogs. In fact, it is my favorite blog, the Earthbound Report. This is where sustainability isn't actually the end point. Sustainability is just the middle of the road. Sustainability is where help and harm are about equal. So we've got our conventional way of doing things, extracting stuff out of the ground, using it, and then throwing it away. We've got green solutions here, which just kind of means a little bit less harm, but still harm, you know, heavy compared to help heavy. And then sustainable is help and harm. But this is where I really encourage schools, teachers, businesses, and others, is to start exploring restorative and regenerative ideas and practices. And so this is a really important vocabulary for us to throw into our communities. What does restorative and regenerative, what do they look like? What are some great examples of those? What does that look like for me as a human? How do I use less waste? How do I produce less waste? How do I reuse waste that exists, and all these sorts of different things? So I'll give you a few examples here. So we have a basic linear economy: take, make, consume, waste. We have a recycling economy: take, make, consume, recycle, make, eventually it gets chucked out, or it's quite a process there. We have circular economies, which is cool. We make, consume, repair, reuse, recycle, but then we have restorative and regenerative circular economies. And that's where the take part is using something that is already a byproduct or a waste from something else. And then we feed that into the production of something. And so it keeps on going around that circle. So we haven't extracted any new resources, but we're utilizing old resources to make something that's useful. Now this example, I'm cautious with my audience as to where I share it and how I share it. But for popular audiences, and my target audience aren't people like you. Generally, my target audience are people who are new to the ideas of sustainability or global citizenship and are a bit scared. The fact that you've decided to join us, maybe at 1 a.m. In American time, to be a part of this call, shows that you already care. But for me, I need popular examples to try and make this feel a little more mainstream and not just a crazy guy living in a tiny house with a compost toilet. So I like this example. So this example that's up on the screen is of Adidas. So Adidas have now made a pair of shoes that are made from ocean plastic. Like all of that shoe has been made from ocean plastic. Goes into their shoes, you use them. When the shoes wear out, you take it back to the store. They can either give you a credit towards your next shoes or for something else. And then those shoes get used in the production of more shoes, okay? It's a pretty commercial sort of, neoliberal model, but it is an example of restorative circular economies. So we're using a waste product to create something we need, and then we just keep on using it over and over again. So, but this is pretty cool. This comes from Safisana, which is an organization in Ghana. And so they just sum it up very easily. Public toilets. So your poo can be used to generate electricity, okay, through biogas. The students love that one or hate it. Our organic waste can be used to create fertilizer, rather than digging fertilizer up out of the ground and extracting resources and all that sort of stuff. So these are all really good examples of restorative and regenerative ideas and practices. Cool. I just want to make sure let me just check the chat. Holistic thinking. I like that. So holistic thinking, I would say, is systems thinking. So this is where we know that one thing connects to everything. And so as best as we can, we're trying to unpeel layers around our choices, decisions, and actions without getting too concerned and without getting too paralyzed about it. But something I work with a few schools is throwing some ideas at them, like saying, should we donate our clothing to vulnerable communities? And you automatically would think, yeah, that's probably a pretty good thing to do. But there are then lots of different angles that fits into. If you produce local clothes in that community, you're going to be a bit annoyed if someone's bringing in free clothes for people. Are people then going to be cold without those clothes? So how do you balance out those decisions? By people donating clothes, does that mean they're going to buy more clothes? Which actually has quite a significant environmental impact, because they're going to buy more clothes thinking, oh yeah, when these clothes, I don't like them or I don't wear them, I can just give them to charity. So that means I can keep on buying more and more new clothes. So the thing for me around holistic thinking or systems thinking, which is the term we use a little bit more, is to try and uncover some of those layers. And the way that I do that is talk about good intentions matching good outcomes. And it's really hard to do that. So we may have the best intentions of shoes made out of ocean plastic, but if they disintegrate while you're running and then the rain catches it and puts it down the drain and sends it back out into the ocean, well, your good intention didn't really meet a good outcome. So, so systems thinking, holistic thinking is really important to kind of build that into being a good global citizen. We're not going to have all the answers, but we can ask better questions. And I think as global citizens, as active and effective global citizens, asking some of those questions is really significant and important and useful. Cool. So, so this slide is just of myself and lots of different organisations and people that I've engaged with over the years, and created a few things myself. So the thing for me is that there are lots of good people doing good things. Yeah. Okay, so systems thinking, holistic thinking. Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure, so I'm just going back to the chat question here from Inna, and it's a good question. So no, I don't know exactly what the difference is between holistic thinking and systems thinking. I would think that they were pretty similar. And then the other thing I look at is second order change. So first order change is sort of a little bit more reactionary, whereas second order systems thinking change, when it could be holistic thinking, is when we're trying to then become more proactive. So a good example is there's a guy called Richard Hames, and he was looking at how do we reorganize military to not keep peace with guns. And so imagine if we turned our military into civil services for our own and other communities. So they wouldn't need all the funding for their weaponry and stuff. We could use that funding for engineering equipment. You know, these are highly skilled people with good levels of fitness and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And they can get jobs done very efficiently. So how do we just reorientate their outcomes and their purpose? So instead of, just going to like, okay, we need to stop getting rid of all these weapons, we're trying to think of solutions that create better, that second order of change that has a knock-on effect. So that's something that I always think of. So when I hear the word holistic thinking, I'm not sure of the definition, but what I think of is second order change. So those solutions that have a much bigger impact than just the immediate obvious ones, but not sure. So so my quick story here is I come from a big family in Australia. I'm the youngest of 6 children, and I'm a lot younger than my older brothers and sisters. I was kind of the mistake, that's right. But I grew up not really caring much about the world. But then when I was 18, I went and worked in a bakery in Japan, and it opened my world up because I didn't know how to speak Japanese. I didn't know how to make bread. But because I went to Japan and learned these things, it just opened my world and thought, oh, cool, I can do whatever I like. I don't have to just do this, this, and this. So on the back of that experience, I then started to do more of the things that I wanted to do as opposed to doing the things that I thought I should do. And so what I wanted to do after finishing, I graduated as a primary school Japanese teacher, and I've still never taught primary school Japanese. でも日本語喋るだよ、大丈夫です。But I still speak Japanese. So instead of going and teaching Japanese in Australia, I went and traveled to Kyrgyzstan to climb mountains. And while I was there, I did some volunteering. Now, I volunteered there as a teacher in a university, and these are some of the university teachers, my fellow university teachers. Now, their salary as university teachers in Kyrgyzstan in 2001 was about $40 for 1 month. So they were essentially almost living in extreme poverty. Back in those definitions was a bit different back then. But I learned a lot from these women, about resilience, resourcefulness, and what can I do to try and find solutions. So that's where it really started for me. And instead of climbing mountains, I started to do more volunteering. And after doing some volunteering in Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Russia, Mongolia, a few other places, I then had run out of money. So I went to South Korea. Now, my salary as a teacher in South Korea was $40 for 1 hour. So I was earning the same amount in 1 hour as my friends in Kyrgyzstan were earning in 1 month. And I remember when I got paid at the end of that first week of teaching in South Korea, that's when it really hit me. It's just like, well, why does the world work like this? I knew that I wasn't smarter. I didn't work longer and harder than Jiblis Norgiza and my other friends from Kyrgyzstan, The only difference is that I was born where I was born, and having access and opportunity to health, education, being able to travel and these sorts of things. And my friends were born where they didn't have the same access and opportunity. And so that led me on a pathway of trying to find answers and solutions and understanding, and, you know, to this day and forever. So I've been very lucky for the last 20 years. I've been to more than 90 countries. I've now given over 1,300 presentations and workshops to over 120,000 people. But I'm still trying to search out that answer of, you know, why and how what can we do that can create, you know, small but significant impacts in the world. And it's good fun, you know. It leads me into lots of different things, like building tiny houses and riding my bike across the country, or all sorts of different things. But the main thing for me has also been to find good people doing good things, and trying to work out what are they doing, how are they doing it, how can I support, what can I learn, and is there something that I can do? And so these are just some of the many people in the world who are doing good things. And then I've also created some of my own concepts. So Teaspoons of Change, Happy Simply are the tiny houses, one in New Zealand and one here in Australia. Polio Points, where students do good things, they get given points. Those points get matched by donations. Donations go to polio eradication. As I was working in polio eradication in Pakistan, India, Uganda, South Sudan, and a few other places. And also Teaspoons of Peace. So I did a master's in peace studies in Japan, and tried to look at, well, how do we create more positive peace in the world? And so there's some ideas in that as well. Cool. Well, we're almost out of time there. And any questions at all? That was just the reason I tell you my story, is that I think our stories are really important. If you're on this chat or you're watching it, then it's not by accident. It shows that you already care or have an interest in global citizenship or sustainability or creating a better world. So I hope that you might find your own story in amongst that of why do you care? You know, it might not have been that one moment like in South Korea when I got paid. It was lots of different things, but there's something there that has made you to connect with coming onto this presentation. And so just remember, your story can be quite powerful and doesn't have to be a big exotic story. It can be lots of different things. So so that's something we're thinking about when you're talking about global citizenship and trying to engage people. But I shall pause once again. Do we have any questions there before we shut things down? Can you have this presentation? You most certainly can. Yeah, I have a, I usually share a PDF version of this. And there is a version up on the Teaspoons of Change website, which I shall put in here.
If you email the link to Steve, he can attach it as well to your recording.
Wonderful. Thanks, Hannah. That's just the answer I was looking for, actually. So yeah, I will attach that. And most things you should be able to find on the Teaspoons of Change website. And then my friend from Pakistan, may I use the expression Teaspoons of Change and Peace? Absolutely. So Teaspoons of Change is only a concept, and I deliberately keep it a concept. So I created, you know, the idea, etc. But I love it when people use it for their own benefit. As long as it's not for selling Coca-Cola or McDonald's or whatever, that's fine. But I'm sure anyone here is going to be using it for the best outcomes in the world. So please feel free to use Teaspoons of Change and the logo, Teaspoons of Peace. There's a link to that as well. Tiny houses, all those sorts of things. So yeah, very much so use that. Any of the slides from here, particularly that sustainability one, there's Help versus Harm. I only got about halfway through my content of this class, and I have 6 classes that I do. Well, I've got a million different classes I do. There's lots more there. So if you have your own personal questions and things, then we can connect through Learning Revolution and in other ways. But thank you all for your time today. And if you're watching this, then well done for making it this far. Please feel free to get in touch, and thank you for the time. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Steve, for providing this platform for us to connect with people from around the world, and wishing you all a good day, good night, and beyond. Cool. Hannah, I shall stop recording and then I'll throw it back to you. Thanks, everyone. See ya.